Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of India's earliest and longest armed rebellions against British rule. But this wasn't a fight led by kings or armies. No, this was something totally different, a challenge to an empire that lasted for nearly half a century. So that's the big question, right? Could a group of monks and religious wanderers actually take on the might of the British East India Company? Well, that's exactly what happened in this incredible story of an unlikely alliance. So, our story kicks off not with soldiers in a barracks, but with Hindu sannyasis and Muslim fakirs. We're going to see how they took this unique, powerful stand against a colonial power that was literally turning their world upside down. Now, you gotta understand, for centuries, these religious groups would travel all across Bengal on pilgrimages. They were deeply respected. Local landlords, villagers, everyone supported them with food and donations. This wasn't just a tradition, it was woven into the very fabric of society. And what's truly remarkable here is the solidarity. You had sannyasis and fakirs fighting side by side. It was this powerful unity that really transcended religious lines, all because they were forged together against a common enemy. So, what on earth could push these deeply religious groups to pick up weapons? Well, the answer lies in what you could call a perfect storm of disastrous corporate greed and a catastrophic natural disaster. You can see just how fast everything changed. After a huge military victory, the East India Company gets what's called diwani rights in 1765. Now, that basically means they went from just being traders to being the official tax collectors for the entire region. They became the rulers, really, and disaster wasn't far behind. And the result? The Great Bengal Famine of 1770. The scale of this tragedy it's just apocalyptic. An estimated 10 million people died. To put that in perspective, that was nearly a third of Bengal's entire population at the time, just wiped out. And it's so important to understand this wasn't just one thing. The company's new taxes were absolutely crippling for farmers. Then, when the famine hits, there's no relief. And to top it all off, they started restricting the sannyasis and fakirs, cutting off their lifeline. For so many, life just became impossible. So, faced with complete ruin, did they just give up? No way. They fought back. They waged this fierce, determined resistance that went on for decades. Now, this revolt wasn't commanded from some central headquarters. It was driven by these amazing, charismatic local leaders who brought all these different groups together. People like Majnu Shah and Babani Pathak became legends. And you even had figures like Devi Chaudharani highlighting the crucial role women played in this resistance. They used what they knew best, the local terrain. They knew the forests, the hills of Bengal and Bihar like the back of their hands. They would strike fast, hit a company treasury, raid a factory, and then just vanish. It kept the much more powerful company forces completely off balance for years. And this is so key to why it lasted so long. It wasn't just a movement of ascetics. They were joined by farmers who'd lost their land, landlords who'd been ruined by taxes, even soldiers who were out of a job. It really became this true coalition of the oppressed. So, obviously, the East India Company wasn't going to take this lying down. Let's take a look at how they hit back. And maybe even more importantly, how they framed the whole story to make their actions seem justified. From the British point of view, these weren't rebels. They weren't people fighting for their lives. No, they were officially labeled as criminals, bandits, and miscreants. And this branding was a tactic, right? It dehumanized the resistance and gave them the justification for the brutal military campaign they launched to crush it. This really gets to the heart of the controversy, a debate that's still happening today. Were they just violent bandits disrupting law and order like the British claimed? Or were they one of India's very first resistance movements, fighting back against exploitation and foreign rule? Honestly, the answer really depends on which side you're looking from. In the end, after decades of fighting, the company's superior military power and organized force just won out. The key leaders were killed or captured, and the armed resistance was crushed. But the story doesn't end on the battlefield, not even close. So you might be thinking, okay, if they were defeated in military terms, what's the lasting impact? Well, as it turns out, the legacy of this so-called failed revolt proved to be way more powerful than its armies. I mean, just look at this transformation. The fighting on the ground stops, but the spirit of the rebellion is captured by one of Bengal's greatest writers. He completely reframes it, turning a historical event into this incredibly powerful symbol for a whole new generation. This book was a total game changer. It took the memory of this revolt, which the British had dismissed as just banditry, and put it right into the heart of India's growing freedom struggle. It reimagined the Sanyasis as these disciplined, patriotic warriors fighting for their motherland. And just think about the impact of that. A song from a novel about an 18th century revolt becomes the anthem for 20th century freedom fighters. Revolutionaries literally went to the gallows with the words Vande Mataram on their lips. It created this direct, unbroken line from that early rebellion all the way to independence. All right, so to wrap it all up, let's hit the 5 key takeaways. This was one of India's first organized anti-colonial revolts. It was a powerful example of Hindu-Muslim unity. It was fueled by both economic and religious oppression. And while it was crushed on the battlefield, its memory survived to inspire India's national song, Vande Mataram. And that really leaves us with this incredible question. How does a rebellion that technically failed become such an undying inspiration? I think this story shows that victory isn't always measured on the battlefield. Sometimes it's measured in the ideas that refuse to die, the stories that get told, and the songs that live on to shape the future of a nation. Thanks for watching The Explainer.